So Myles Garrett with that sack now ties Al Baker for the most sacks in NFL history if you're going by the unofficial stats. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Monday. We are ready for the playoffs. My name's Ernie Jennings. I'm your host, and we're going to talk about the games from Sunday, some of those games. And then at the end, we'll take a quick look at the playoff setup. So really exciting to get into the playoffs. Generally, as a Jaguar fan, well, our season was over beginning of December. Generally, that's what it's been like. Maybe this new coaching staff, new management people, rejuvenation of the players because of the coaching staff. Maybe we've got a team that'll be around year in, year out for the playoffs. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But it's nice to be talking about the playoffs and with a team that is actually in the playoffs. So looking forward to that. Now we're going to talk about these games on Sunday. Honestly, the Sunday night game was exciting, but a lot of these games were duds. I mean, with a lot of players not playing and games that weren't important, but even the games that were supposed to decide something, they weren't that close either. It was kind of a little bit of a letdown for a Sunday where I was anticipating a lot of big key matchups. And like I said, the only one that really turned out to be super exciting was the game between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. All right, so with that, let's get into the games that I'm going to cover today. And we'll start with a game that was important and was close. Little did people know it was going to be that important until last week when Atlanta beat the Rams. All of a sudden, they became a player in deciding who would win the NFC South. And the Atlanta Falcons beat the New Orleans Saints. So with that victory, it kept the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from being able to go to the playoffs, even though on Saturday, Tampa Bay had beat Carolina. So they did their part, but then Atlanta came along and won. New Orleans gave an effort, but not enough to win the game. And that bumped Tampa Bay Buccaneers out of that playoff spot. And now Carolina will be representing themselves in the playoffs at a record of 8-9. But that's the way it goes. All right. So in this game, like I said, this was in Atlanta, and the Falcons won 19-17. It was a pretty close game all the way through. Halftime 10-7. I mean, it was just that way, pretty much a very close game. Now, in this game, Atlanta won this game, but New Orleans really dominated in a lot of ways. Total net yards, Atlanta 208, New Orleans 300. Now, the problem New Orleans had, they had a fumble and an interception. That was a key. Time of possession was pretty close, a little over 31 minutes for the Saints, a little under 29 for Atlanta. So really, it was just what they were doing with the ball when they had it. Like I said, Schaaf, 23 out of 35 attempts, 259 yards. He ended up with a quarterback rating of 85.3. Now, Atlanta, again, 18 completions for Kirk Cousins on 32 attempts for 180 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was sacked 4 times, quarterback rating of 69.8. I mean, as I'm reading this, you're thinking, why did the Saints not win this game? But they didn't. Now, for the Saints rushing department, Audric Esteem, 21 carries for 63 yards. That's only 3 yards a carry. This is a pretty decent team, the Saints, considering. I think Schaaf's going to be good. He had 3 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. And they get some new blood in there as far as running back. I don't know about Alvin Kamara, if he's coming back or not. And give Chris Olave some help as far as receivers go, and they might have a pretty decent team. Their defense is pretty decent, pretty good. For Atlanta Falcons, Bijan Robinson, 15 carries for 33 yards. That's just 2.2 yards a carry. And one of those carries was 12 yards. So that means he was 14 for carries for 21 yards on the rest of them. Man, that's really bad. Tyler Algier didn't do any better. 7 carries for 16 yards. That's 2.3 yards a carry. So really pretty much the same. So really they could not run the ball, Atlanta. I'm a little surprised by that. But they couldn't. Really couldn't pass the ball much either. Now, esteem for the Saints, as far as receiving goes, had 5 receptions for 43 yards. So between running and catching, he ended up with 106 yards of offense, which is really pretty decent for him. He'll probably be around. I wouldn't think he's going to be the starting running back, though. He led the team in receptions along with Dante Pettis, who had 5 catches for 60 yards. Chris Olave didn't even play in this game. Taysom Hill had 3 catches for 32 yards. So really it was just spread around among several players, no one with more than 5 catches. Now for the Falcons, Kyle Pitts had 6 catches for 58 yards. Drake London, 4 catches, 78 yards, and 1 was a touchdown, the only touchdown there. Those are your 2 leading receivers. No one else had more than 3 catches. Robinson had 3 catches for 10 yards. Along with it, he only had 43 total yards from scrimmage yards. Not good at all. Just a crazy game in a way that Atlanta was able to pull out the win on. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Saints just couldn't get it in the end zone. They get there, but they couldn't get in the end zone. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here. Bijan Robinson, despite the fact that he only had 33 yards this season in rushing yards, ended up with 1,478, which is good enough to be 6th all-time for the Atlanta Falcons rushing yards in a single season. So really a good season, despite the fact that their team just didn't play that well. Not consistent. Man, sometimes they look pretty decent, but then other games they just didn't. Now, also for the Falcons in receptions career. Well, Drake London and Kyle Pitts had both made the top 10 in receptions for the Atlanta Falcons in their careers. Both of them did it this year. But Drake London with 4 catches now has 309 receptions to put him into 8th spot all time in receptions for the Atlanta Falcons. Kyle Pitts stays at number 10. He has 284. So those 2 players, if they come back next year, now I don't know what's happening with Kyle Pitts, if he is coming back or not. We'll have to wait and see. But if they do, they both have obviously a chance to move up the list next year. Now, moving on to our next game. Cleveland Browns versus Cincinnati Bengals. And wow, the Cleveland Browns beat the Bengals in Cincinnati. A little bit of a surprise there to me that's what happened. But yeah, Cleveland Browns win this game. And the big news out of that game, obviously, was that Garrett got the sack that he was looking for to become the all-time leading sack artist in NFL history for a single season. And we'll look at that in a minute. So in this game, it was close. Cincinnati should have won this game, but Cleveland had a 90 in the first quarter, 97-yard interception return for touchdown. That was huge. Cincinnati, the reason they had 6 points is they did not get any points after their touchdowns. First kick was blocked, and then another kick didn't make it. I mean, they just couldn't make a kick, and then they tried 2-point conversion, couldn't make that either. And they needed the 2-point conversion to tie the game at 20-20, and they couldn't do it. So Cleveland Browns win this game 20-18. And obviously they cut 14 of their points off of One's on an interception return, which was 97 yards. And then they had a fumble return for 47 yards for another touchdown. So that's where they got their touchdowns. Otherwise, they had a couple of field goals to tack on. That's all the scoring they did. So in this game, really, Cincinnati basically gave the game to Cleveland with those plays. And when you look at the numbers, you can see it. First down, Cincinnati 24, Cleveland 11. Total net yards, Cleveland 200, Cincinnati 364. Wow, what a difference, huh? Time of possession, Cincinnati 35.5 minutes, Cleveland 24.5 minutes. When you look at the numbers here as far as the quarterbacks go, Dear Sanders, 11 completions on 22 attempts. That's only 50%. 111 yards passing. That's 5 yards per attempt. No touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked 6 times. Got a quarterback rating of 64.8. Joe Burrow, on the other hand, 29 completions on 39 attempts, which is a good percent. Only 236 yards, though, which was 6.1 yards per attempt. So not the same down the field as we've seen. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, which was a pivotally bad interception for Cincinnati as it turned into a touchdown. Only sacked twice, had a quarterback rating of 104.2. So not bad for him, except for that interception, which was horrible. Now, the Cleveland Browns rushing game, Dylan Sampson, 10 carries for 32 yards, 3.2 yards a carry. Raheem Sanders, 5 carries for 26 yards. Shadir Sanders, 3 carries for 26 yards. So they ended up not bad, actually. 24 carries for 118 yards. That's 4.9 yards a carry. Not bad, really. For Cincinnati, Chase Brown continued his good second half of the season. 13 carries for 72 yards. That's 5.5 yards a carry. And Samaje Perine had 8 carries for 42 yards. 5 1/4 yards per carry. So they had 25 carries, one more carry, but they had 142 yards. So 5.7 yards a carry for them. So Cincinnati ran the ball well, threw the ball well, and still somehow ended up losing. In the receiving department, really nothing. Wow. For Cleveland, leading receivers, there were 3 of them, all had 2 catches. Malachi Corley had 2 catches for 20 yards. That was the best. Cedric Tillman had 1 catch for 23 yards. That's the most yardage. It's just on 1 catch. That was it. Only 11 receptions in the entire game. Now for Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, 8 catches, 96 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins, 6 catches, 67 yards and a touchdown. This is what they wanted to see the whole year. And with Chase being out a game or Higgins being out, they never had it. With Burrow being out, it just never materialized as a whole for the entire season. But that was what they were looking for. Those 2 players just dominating, it just didn't happen. Now, looking at some of the numbers, as I said, Myles Garrett, and for the Cleveland Browns, already had the sack record in a single season, but he just added 1 more to it. He now has 23 sacks in a single season for the Cleveland Browns. That's the number 1 position there. Bill Glass, back in 1965, had the record at 16.5. So obviously he crushed that record. Now, Myles Garrett, on the unofficial sacks record, which started in 1960, goes back to 1960. Al Baker had the most sacks in NFL history with 23, even more than Strahan or Watt did by half a sack. So Myles Garrett with that sack now ties Al Baker for the most sacks in NFL history if you're going by the unofficial stats. And as I've said before, I think they should be official. They've been reviewed over and over. All the films have been watched from those games from 1960 on. So I don't know why they have yet to not include those. But either way, Myles Garrett is now the top of the list. And when you're looking at the official list, obviously he is number one, Myles Garrett, all-time sack leader in NFL history in a single season with 23 sacks, passing Michael Strahan and TJ Watt. Both had 22 and a half. So really, it came down these last couple of weeks. He was having a difficult time to get that last sack and a half. It really was rough. And it took till the fourth quarter before he got that sack. And when you watch it, it wasn't much of a sack. I mean, he came around the defender and kind of stuck his arm out, and the quarterback went down. It was interesting to see. Wasn't as bad as Strahan when he got his sack, where quarterback just fell down and basically gave it to him. Wasn't quite like that, but it was close. But anyway, good for Myles Garrett. 23 sacks in a single season is so impressive. Now, for Cincinnati Bengals, Jamar Chase. This season now in receiving yards, he now has 1,412. He ended the season with that, which is good enough to put him in sixth all-time in Cincinnati Bengals history in receiving yards for a single season. So he had a pretty decent season. What a crazy up and down season he had, playing well and then having a rough time with the changes of quarterbacks. It made such a difference. Now looking at T. Higgins. T. Higgins led the team in touchdown receptions this year, and he had 11 total, which was good enough to tie him for seventh all-time in Cincinnati Bengals history of receiving touchdowns in a single season. So while Jamar Chase had more receptions and yardage this year, T. Higgins had the more touchdowns. Now for Joe Burrow, he now has 157 passing touchdowns. He broke a tie he had with Carson Palmer. He now is in fourth place all-time in Cincinnati Bengals history for passing touchdowns in his career with 157. Really good. Now next year, Boomer Esiason comes up. He needs 30 to catch him, which he should be able to do if he can play the entire season. That's been the problem. Now, back to Jamar Chase in his career-wise, as far as receptions go, he moves into fourth place all-time. He had 8 receptions in this game. He now has 520. He passed Tyler Boyd, who was on the team a couple of years ago. So Jamar Chase is now in fourth place all-time in career receptions for the Cincinnati Bengals with 520. T. Higgins, he had 6 receptions. He now has 392, which puts him in the 9th spot all-time for the Cincinnati Bengals in receptions for his career. He passed Darnay Scott. So you got two top 10 players there in receptions for the Cincinnati Bengals. Really good receivers. And next year, obviously, if you're a Cincinnati fan, you hope they be on the field the entire season together all the time. They just complement each other so well. All right, another one for these guys here. This is in receiving touchdowns for Jamar Chase. He was in a tie with Isaac Curtis for fourth. He had 1 receiving touchdown. He now has 54, which gives him fourth place to himself in receiving touchdowns in his career for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, T. Higgins was already in sixth. He stays there. He's got 45. He had 1 touchdown. He now has 45. Now, moving on to our next game, which is the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. This was a game, Giants just looked impressive, They're a fun team to watch. I like Dart, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how well they play next year when they get all their players back, and if they can keep them on the field. Man, they had the worst time keeping people healthy, and they just never could, to be honest with you. So in this game, looking at the numbers, the Giants win this game 34-17. Now, part of this came with the fact that the Cowboys sat down Prescott at halftime. He only had 70 yards in the game anyway. And again, these last games, you don't know who's even playing in a lot of these games, but the Giants do pull it out. They had 380 yards, net yards. Dallas had 286. A lot of penalties in this game compared to some of the other games, which were relatively penalty-free. This game, the Giants had the ball for 33 minutes, Dallas 27. Key stat, which often is third down conversions, 2 out of 8 for Dallas for 25%, and they made it on fourth down, 1 out of 2 for 50%, while the Giants converted third down 8 out of 14. That's 57%, so that's pretty good right there. Now, looking at these two teams, for the Cowboys, like I said, Dak Prescott was only in there for a half. He had 7 completions on 11 attempts, only 70 yards. Had a quarterback rating of 81.6. And then Joe Milton came in, had 7 completions on 13 attempts for 73 yards. And he had a quarterback rating of 38.3, and that's due to an interception he threw. Jackson Dart, on the other hand, had a pretty good game. 22 completions on 32 attempts. That's 230 yards of passing there, and 7.2 yards an attempt, 2 touchdowns. And he had a quarterback rating of 110.2, so really pretty good there. Now in the running game, like I said, Javonte Williams, he didn't play for the Cowboys. These wins or losses, you got to take them in stride because this game had no bearing in playoffs or anything like that. So some players weren't playing. Jaden Blue led the Cowboys with 16 carries for 64 yards. That's 4 yards a carry, and he had a touchdown. That led the team. Joe Milton had 4 carries for 43 yards. That was the quarterback, so he ran the ball pretty well too. For the Giants, Tyrone Tracy had a good game, 18 carries for 103 yards, 5.7 yards a carry. Jackson Dart ran around again, 5 carries for 32 yards. And then Devin Singletary had 9 carries for 26 yards. In the receiving department, they had their main players, but for Dallas, really nobody. They had 143 yards of passing. Ryan Flournoy had 5 catches for 68 yards, so he had half of the yards basically. He led the team in receptions and yardage by far. CeeDee Lamb, 1 catch for 4 yards. George Pickens, 1 catch for 9 yards. So they just put in a lot of backups, and they didn't pass the ball but 14 times. I think they were just trying to get this game over with. Obviously, there's not a lot of point in this game. Now for the Giants receiving, I've not even heard of this guy. Gunnar Olszewski had 8 catches for 102 yards, so not bad. Tyrone Tracy had 8 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. So for him, he ended up with 159 yards of offense. So he had a really good game. All right, now let's look at some of the numbers. So looking at Dak Prescott, he had 70 yards, which was just enough to move him up actually 2 spots. He now has 4,552 yards, which is good enough to be the 3rd best passing yards in a single season for the Dallas Cowboys. Looking at their kicker, total scoring in his career, Brandon Aubrey, he's only been on the team for 3 years, has 457 points he's scored in his career, which is good enough to put him into 6th place all time now, moved from 8th to 6th. He's obviously he's a fantastic kicker. Now, looking at this season alone, Brandon Aubrey had 5 points in this game. He was tied with himself, and this is just for single season total points in the season. He had 150 coming into the game, which was tied for 2nd. Now with this 5 more points, he's got 155, which puts him at 2nd all-time best season in total points for the Dallas Cowboys. And now Brandon Aubrey owns the top 3 spots. So he's only been on the team 3 years. He's got the top 3 spots. And they're all 150, 155, 157. So very consistent numbers he's putting up each year. All right. Let's look at another game, the Green Bay Packers versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now this game, wow. It's just another game where you don't know what to think. Jordan Love sat, so it was just a bad game for Green Bay. They ended their season at 9-7-1. Minnesota was 9-8. Minnesota Vikings win this game 16-3. It was 13-3 at halftime. And, then they just kind of playing it out. Looking at the numbers, Minnesota had 23 first downs. Green Bay had 12, so doubled them up there. In yardage, they tripled up. Minnesota had 363 yards, net yards of offense to Green Bay's 121. Here's why. This is net yards. Rushing, Green Bay had 128 yards rushing. Now remember, they had a total of net yards of 121. So in the passing game, they had minus 7 yards. Green Bay had minus 7 yards passing, net yards passing. Wow, that's terrible. They passed for 34 yards, but they were sacked for 41. Wow. I have not seen that. I don't know if that's a record. I should look that up. It's probably not, but wow, that's horrible. I don't care what you got going on. You should not be doing that. I mean, unless they had all second, third stringers playing. I know Minnesota has a pretty decent defense, but still, that's terrible. Let's look at some of those numbers. So for Green Bay, Clayton Tune was the quarterback. Had 6 completions on 11 attempts for 34 yards. That's 3 yards an attempt. No touchdowns, no interceptions, but he was sacked 4 times for 41 yards. That's where you get your minus 7. He had a quarterback rating of 60.4. Now McCarthy, 14 completions on 23 attempts for 182 yards. That's 8 yards an attempt. No touchdowns, no interceptions, no sacks. Quarterback rating of 85.8. After he left the game, when it was over at halftime, Max Brosmer came in. He had 7 completions on 8 attempts. That's pretty impressive. Only 1 incompletion. Only 57 yards passing. 7 yards per attempt. And he had a quarterback rating of 96.4. In the running game, and they didn't start Jacobs either. So the Green Bay just said, we're not moving anywhere. We're going to be a wild card team, so let's just sit everybody. For Green Bay, Christopher Brooks had 13 carries for 61 yards. That's 4.7 yards a carry. Emmanuel Wilson, 18 carries for 44 yards. That's only 2.44 per carry. And then the quarterback had 4 carries for 23 yards. You can see they were trying to just run, just like the other game. Let's just run this game out and get it over with, and everybody can go home. For Minnesota, Jordan Mason, 14 carries for 94 yards. That's 6.7 yards a carry. And Ty Chandler had 10 carries for 23 yards. Let's see who the receivers were for Green Bay. Kobe Keeney James led the team with 2 catches for 15 yards. Nobody else had more than 1, and that's because there was only 6 total receptions in the game for Green Bay. For Minnesota, Justin Jefferson had a good game, 8 catches, 101 yards. That was good. He's the only one. After that, 3 catches was the best, next best. So it was a really kind of a game where, like I said, the teams they're not going to the playoffs. Green Bay is going, but they're not changing. They're just going to be a wild card team. So it didn't matter. They needed to rest some players. Jacobs had been hurt, and it gave them a chance to sit some players. So you don't know what to expect when they go into the playoffs. How are they going to be? They're going to play like this? Hopefully not. Hopefully they put up some kind of a fight. Now, in this game, there were no top 10s. It's hard to have a top 10 when nobody's really playing that would be one of those players. All right, let's do one more game, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans. And this was at Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville. Now, looking at that game, like I said, Jacksonville crushed this game. They won 41-7. What's funny about that is Jacksonville decided to take the ball at the beginning of the game, 3 plays and out. They lost yardage. They went backwards. Quarterback sack. It was terrible. They punted. Tennessee came down, scored a touchdown right away. That was it. After that, it was all Jaguars. 31-7 at halftime, and it ended up 41-7 at the end of the game. Looking at some of the numbers, Jacksonville 24 first downs, Tennessee only 10. Net yards 319 for Jacksonville, 194 for Tennessee. Just all around good game. 33 minutes of possession for the Jaguars, 27 for Tennessee. Now looking at the quarterbacks, Cameron Ward went out. He scored that touchdown. He ran it in, kind of injured his shoulder. Hopefully not too bad. And you don't know if it would have been for a game for any kind of meaningful purposes. He might have stayed in. I don't know. He was wearing a little shoulder harness for his arm. So it might have been I don't think it was serious, like he's going to need surgery or anything, but just precautionary. So he didn't play but that into the first quarter, and that was it. Brandon Allen came in. He had 17 completions on 30 attempts, only 72 yards passing. That's only 2.4 yards per attempt. He had 1 interception, which was returned for a touchdown. Only sacked 1 time. He had a quarterback rating of 47.9. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, 22 completions on 30 attempts, 255 yards passing, 8.5 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a quarterback rating of 131.9. Very impressive. Nick Mullins came in the fourth quarter. He had 2 completions on 2 attempts for 16 yards. Now for Tennessee in the running game, Jaguars consistently have held the running backs to, I don't think the best running back had more than 70 yards, and that was Taylor for the Colts. But Tony Pollard, 14 carries for 48 yards. That's 3.4 yards a carry. TJ Spears had 3 carries for 18 yards. So they ended up with 19 carries for 77 yards. I don't think no team came in and got 100 yards on the Jaguars the entire season as a team even. So very impressive run defense for the Jaguars. Now for them, they didn't do too hot in the running game either. Travis Etienne, 14 carries for 32 yards. That's 2.3 yards a carry. Bijan Tootin, 5 carries for 23 yards. That's 4.6, and he did have a touchdown. And then Trevor Lawrence had 2 carries for 11 yards. Not too good there. Now for Tennessee in the receiving game, Spears had 7 catches for 9 yards. To lead the team as far as receptions by far, Elik Ayamanar had 3 catches for 50 yards. That's on 10 targets. He was targeted 10 times, which is quite a few, but only had 3 catches for 50 yards. No one had a touchdown as far as that goes. For the Jaguars, Brenton Strange. Now ball got passed all over for the Jaguars, which is really good. Makes it hard on defenses. I mean, 9 different people caught a pass in this game. But Brenton Strange had 6 catches for 52 yards. Jacoby Myers had 5 catches for 44 yards. Strange had a touchdown catch as well. Parker Washington, another good game, 5 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown. And then Quinton Morris, you never would have guessed it, had 1 catch for 5 yards, but it was a touchdown. Now, looking at some of the numbers in this game, this season now, Trevor Lawrence had 255 yards in this game. He went over the 4,000-yard mark. Now has 4,007 yards he ended this season with, which is good enough to put him in 5th all-time in receiving yards or passing yards in a single season. He now has passed for 4,000 yards 3 times in his career, which is the best. No other quarterback for the Jaguars it's thrown for over 4,000 yards more than one time in a single season. He really turned his season around halfway through. About the last 7-8 games. Just has been very impressive quarterback. Trevor Lawrence again. This is a negative. Should have put this one first, but he was sacked 2 times in the game. He ended this season with 41 sacks, which is 8th worst as far as Jaguars go, as far as quarterbacks being sacked in a single season with 41. Now, Cam Little, man, he's been an impressive kicker. He scored 11 points, which gave him 140 points this season. Cam Little, with 140 points, now has the number 1 spot for the Jacksonville Jaguars as far as most points in a single season. Now, what was impressive about it was he kicked a 67-yard field goal in this game. One short of it. The record he holds is 68. He held that. But that was done inside in the Dome in New Orleans. This was outdoors here in Jacksonville. So he now has the top 2 longest field goals, and he holds the record for the longest indoor and outdoor. Pretty impressive. And he drilled it. It would have been good from 70 yards. It was down the middle and well over the bar. He's made, with a kick, when he kicked that 68-yard field goal, he had missed the field goal before that, whether it was in that game or a previous game. But since that, he's made 20 field goals in a row. So he's really been, his confidence has been sky high. All right, now looking at Trevor Lawrence again, for his career, he now has 17,822 yards passing for his career, which is good enough now to put him to 2nd all-time in Jacksonville Jaguars history. He passed Blake Bortles, the king of trash yards. The only one left for Trevor Lawrence, which would probably take him 2 years. He'd have to have 2 4,000-yard seasons, but he'll catch Mark Brunell, who leads the Jacksonville Jaguars for most passing yards in a single season with 25,698. But Trevor Lawrence is here, and he's going to stay here now. He's got that long contract. So, barring injury, he definitely has a shot to pass him in 2 seasons. All right, that's a look at the games we're going to cover today. Let's take a quick look at the playoff scenarios. If you haven't already heard this, here's one more time. The Denver Broncos for the AFC clinch the AFC West. They also clinched the number 1 playoff spot, so they get a bye in the first round. Patriots are number 2. They're going to play the Chargers in New England. They clinched the AFC East. So they had a super impressive season as well. We had quite a turnover this year. The Bills did not win their division. The Ravens didn't win their division. Kansas City didn't win their division. That's 3 right there. Houston did not win their division, which they had won the last 2 or 3 years. So it's been quite a turnaround. Jacksonville Jaguars are the 3rd seed. They clinched the AFC South. They play the Buffalo Bills in Jacksonville. That game will be on Sunday at 1. Pittsburgh Steelers with their close win. That was a fantastic game. I'll talk about it tomorrow probably. But the Steelers win, and they are now the 4th seed. They play the Houston Texans in Pittsburgh. That'll be a tough game. That's on a Monday night. I don't understand that, but that's when they're going to play. And as far as wild cards go, Houston Texans are the 5th seed. Buffalo Bills are the 6th seed. They finished their season at 12-5. And the Los Angeles Chargers are the 7th seed. Now, looking at the NFC, Seattle Seahawks finished their season at 14-3. Honestly, they look good. Their defense is impressive. Their offense is good, has played super well at times, but they looked much better than I expected, and kudos to them. 14-3. But they clinched the NFC West. They also clinched the number 1 playoff seed, so they get the bye this week. Chicago Bears are the 2nd seed, even despite losing. All Philadelphia had to do was play their starters a little bit and win that game, and they would have been the number 2 seed, but I guess they didn't care. Chicago Bears, the number 2 seed. They clinched the NFC North. They play the Green Bay Packers again. They play twice in the season, but they're going to play them a 3rd time. The Eagles are the 3rd seed. They clinched the NFC East, and they will be playing the San Francisco 49ers in Philadelphia. And then the 4th seed, by default, the Carolina Panthers at 8-9 clinched the NFC South. So they're the number 4 seed, and they get to play the Los Angeles Rams in Carolina, which they actually beat the Rams earlier this season in Carolina. I doubt seriously they beat the Rams 2 times in Carolina, but we will get to see that. So the Rams are the 5th seed. San Francisco 49ers are the 6th seed, and the Green Bay Packers are the 7th seed. That is a look at the playoffs. So I'll be covering this season out. We'll look at who were the season leaders. We'll wrap up the games that were played on Sunday as well. And then we'll be looking at the playoffs. That's exciting. I can't wait. All right. Appreciate you listening. That is a wrap for this episode. Please like and subscribe. You can watch this video on Just the Stats NFL on YouTube, where you'll see the charts that I'm going to post as well. But you can also listen there. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast app. And as I always say, please like and subscribe. I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate all the subscribers. It's growing slowly, and I'll continue to improve it to help you enjoy the podcast when you're listening. All right, so that is a wrap for NFL Top 10s for Monday. I will see you on Tuesday. I'm out.